It is the combination of the 4 elements in one person that makes the avatar so powerful. But it can make you more powerful too.
When you have one thing that you rely on all the time, if you ever lose access to that ability, that part of yourself, you will be completely decimated and lost.
The best stories are where they're structured like a puzzle with just a few pieces missing, and you've been given a few pieces around, and you get to use your mind to figure out, does this go here? Does this go here? What it does is it's giving you ownership over the story. I'm invested now in the story.
I think this is a character who stands out to me not just in this show, but in media as a whole for what they represent.
Like, I'm angry at myself.
What we don't express stays buried.
We've already gone through a really interesting transition point.
You almost see the entire arc of their characters that's going to happen over the next 60 episodes in this 4-minute clip.
We are seeing a one-dimensional character step into another dimension.
Avatar is the definition of made for all ages.
Welcome back, everybody, to Frame of Mind, where psychology and filmmaking meet at the intersection of storytelling. My name is Jordan. I'm a video editor.
My name is Curtis. I'm a psychotherapist.
Curtis, today we're talking about, I'm so excited, Avatar, The Last Airbender.
I'm excited to see you excited, because if I'm not mistaken, this was your first time watching the original Avatar, The Last Airbender.
So here is my experience with the show. As growing up, I saw an episode or two here and there, and my immediate reaction, because I was a little bit older when I first saw it, was like, this is a kid's show. This is kind of dumb, silly, childish. And now I've watched it again with my 32-year-old man brain and my eyes of adulthood being like, this is incredible. This is so intricately woven. This is a masterpiece in storytelling and character writing and visual design. It's just like, rah, I love it.
What's funny is I had a super different experience.
Really?
So this is your first time, and your first time you kind of like dismissed it going through when you were a kid, but still a little bit older, like high school, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My experience with this show, this is probably my 5th or 6th time running through the entire series. This has been like a... You know, people have those shows that they go back to as like their comfort shows. I'd say this is for sure one of mine.
Yes.
I initially saw this in university.
Really?
And it was the funniest thing because in the dorm room of all the guys that I was with, we would have like every week when the new episode came out, like 8 of us would cram into one person's tiny closet-sized dorm room. We'd boot up the computer and bootleg Avatar and just like watch through the episodes. And it was crazy to me to think, because I had the same response, like, this is technically a kid's show. Why are all these like 18, 19-year-old guys interested in this show? And I feel like it really speaks to one of the strengths. I think when you talk about made for all ages, Avatar is the definition of made for all ages.
The gold standard.
This is something that you could let your 3-year-old watch, maybe. I don't know, maybe it's a little bit too intense, but like you could let a tiny child watch this.
Yes.
They would be entertained, they'd have fun. You could show this to your parent, to your older sibling. They would have fun too.
They'll be able to latch on to the surface level emotions and the storytelling, and the pieces about genocide and war will probably go a little bit over their head. So it's so well created that I'm almost wanting to have kids just so that I can show them this show.
I need to bring more people into the world to appreciate Avatar.
I've shown everybody I can this show. I need to make more people so that I can show them the show.
I love it. So I'm actually curious, what was your first impression? Because you had the first impression when you were younger.
Yes.
When you came back and watched, I'm curious, like maybe going through the first couple of episodes, what was that first impression during your rewatching of it?
A little bit of, I wouldn't say shame. I would say I'm a little bit sad that I didn't see it for what it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
Because I think I would have appreciated it. I think it would have been good for me to see at a younger age. Like it wouldn't have like shaped me into like a better human being, or maybe it would, but yeah. I think it's more just it's an opportunity that I think was missed at a younger age. I think it would have taught me a lot of valuable insights and lessons about good storytelling, about what makes a good character, things that I learned later on down the road. But I'm also happy that now, having seen it as late as I did, I'm able to look at this with fresh eyes and be like, now I can see why it's as good as it is. I don't just feel like it's good. I can articulate why it's good. And that to me is super cool. So I think it's that having gone through the whole filmmaking journey and being able to really see it for what it is and see why it's working, that to me feels really cool and almost makes it worthwhile that I didile see it that way at a younger age.
Yeah. I was looking up for preparation for this, I was looking up like top 10, top 25 lists of all Nickelodeon shows of all time because I was really curious about it. And I saw so many. I had one list that I saw where Avatar was listed as the 25th best show on Nick of all time. I was like, literally everything else. And I was like, it's a crime. It almost feels like an unacceptable view, right? Like you're allowed to have so many views, but
except for that one.
Well, part of it is because I think a lot of the time those lists are based on nostalgia, right? What did people grow up with? What do they love? And what did the most people grow up with and love?
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to a more objective, less subjective measure, when it comes to a technically crafted show, there are very, very few things that I think could stand above Avatar when it comes to it. Like it's the gold standard when it comes to, you'd say like children's shows, right?
Yeah.
Beautifully crafted, beautifully written, some of the best work on a technical storytelling level that I think you would see. And I think that really is why it resonates with so many people. Yeah. Like it has earned its fan base.
It kind of resonates in the same way as The Lion King. It's family friendly while still being deep. Family friendly gets a bad rap, gets a bad name because it feels like it's dumbed down, it's childish. Like, no, this is whatever age you are, you can pull out something from it.
Yeah.
And it is crafted in such a way that the things that are more intense and more mature will be able to be taken out by the people who are able to take those out, but it's not really going to be put in the face of people who don't quite understand those things yet.
It's muted for people who aren't at an age to appreciate that stuff, but not so much that it takes away from the gravity when you do have what it takes to really connect with the, that's a little deeper, that's a little darker, that's a little bit more intense.
Exactly. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons that everybody likes this show is because of how the characters are written.
Yeah.
I think right off the bat, I'm wondering, who do you think out of all of the characters, maybe the main 7, who do you think is the best written character?
What kind of question is that? How
we're getting right into it. Dive right into the meat and potatoes.
Curtis, what is your favorite dish? Is it like Michelin star chef seared steak or Michelin star chef prepared duck? Or
do you mean Michelin star turtle duck?
Yeah. No, Michelin star lion turtle.
Oh yeah.
That would be a humongous dish. You know what? I feel like I don't think I can actually answer that.
So sorry, that's a bit of an unfair question, especially right off the bat. Basically, okay, to be selfish, I have an answer to that question.
Oh.
That's very I have a very crystal clear answer to that question.
Really?
And why that's the case. And so it's a little bit selfish of me because I'm just like, I think the answer is very clear.
Okay, I have guesses, but we'll see. Well, you know what? I will make a guess.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can pull out which one it is.
Let's see. Do you want to make a guess right? I won't tell you if it's.
I've got it in my brain.
Okay. Well, maybe say it to the camera so people can prove it.
You know what I'm gonna do?
What?
No, hang on a second.
You're gonna write it on a piece of paper?
No. You turn away, and I'm gonna mouth it to the camera.
Okay.
And you can put up a picture of the character. And then,
in editing?
Yeah, and
future Jordan will know this.
Future Jordan will know, but present Jordan won't.
All right,
okay, ready?
I'm closing my eyes.
Uncle Iroh. Okay, you're good.
Just watch. It's the Cabbage Man.
Oh, I should have guessed that.
Yeah, why didn't you?
Oh no! It's like, who's the best written character? Cabbage Man. He's the best running joke that this show has or any show has.
Yes.
If we start with the very first characters that we're introduced to, I think the first 5 minutes of the show really sets the tone for how this is going to go.
It's not getting away from me this time. Watch and learn, Katara. This is how you catch a fish.
Sokka, look!
Shh, Katara, you're gonna scare it away. I can already smell it cooking.
But Sokka, I caught one! Hey!
Why is it that every time you play with magic water, I get soaked?
It's not magic, it's water bending. And it's...
Yeah, an ancient art unique to our culture, blah, blah, blah. Look, I'm just saying that if I had weird powers, I'd keep my weirdness to myself.
You're calling me weird? I'm not the one who makes muscles at myself every time I see my reflection in the water.
So even just in that,
Yeah.
How much information does that give us about the characters?
Oh, so much.
And especially the thing that I like about it is that there's exposition in there a little bit, but it's really well hidden because it's hidden in the interaction between two characters. I don't remember what the technical term for this is, but it's
show don't tell.
The idea of you jump directly into the action as it's going. So there's no like warming up, there's no prep. It's like we're just dropped into two kids in an ice place going about their daily lives, having interaction between each other, having the conflicts that they would typically have, right? So it already shows us like lots about Sokka in particular. It kind of gives us some pieces of personality, right? It gives us pieces about Katara, and especially I love the facial expression that she made when she was waterbending, right? It's like
yeah.
What does that facial expression look like to you?
Yeah, it says that this is something that I'm still trying to figure out. I'm not confident in it.
Yep.
And so the thing that I love about that is that she successfully caught the fish,
Yep.
but that felt good because she was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Without her saying anything, you'd say, she's capable of doing things, but she feels very uncertain about it, right? And you contrast that beautifully with her brother, with Sokka.
Yeah.
Everything about his initial facial expressions, like, I got this,
Confidence.
overconfidence, and he can't do it,
Yeah.
fails at it, right? Or he's the one who gets soaked. He like has the bad thing happen to him. So you have a contrast between these two people already. Sokka's got too much confidence. Katara doesn't have enough confidence. Sokka needs to build his skill. Katara needs to get comfortable with the skills that she has, right? So already there, some phenomenal stuff. And then if you keep going, there's even more pieces to this, which is awesome.
Related to you. Ever since Mom died, I've been doing all the work around camp while you've been off playing soldier.
Katara?
I even wash all the clothes. Have you ever smelled your dirty socks? Let me tell you, not pleasant!
Katara, settle down!
No, that's it. I'm done helping you. From now on your own.
I am so happy. I saw this when I first saw this episode, but I'm so happy that it hits the same way looking back on this, is that the bending is tied to emotion.
Right? It's like Katara has this sense where you see the initial piece where she's unconfident, but then we get this element where now she's looking at not even paying attention. She doesn't realize that she doesn't know, but when she's getting upset, all of a sudden you see the connection to her bending gets more powerful, more strong. And it's like there's this hidden potential that and it's great to intentional, unintentional, I don't know what the symbolism, but the way that she's looking at Sokka rather than the iceberg that she's breaking apart is like, I have this capacity, but it is invisible to me. I am not aware of it, right? This is a potential that I have, but it is still hidden, at least to me.
Yes.
So there's something very cool there. And the other cool thing too is, even when, Sokka's kind of like, I can't believe I shouldn't have brought a girl around. Like you could, again, that's a surface level thing where you could look at Sokka's going to have a piece where he starts out as this kind of, chauvinistic guy, partially tied to his overconfidence. But I think there's a way bigger theme element going on there, which is because he is overconfident, he is significantly limited in what he is open to in terms of where he'll pull his growth and learning from, which for going forward, right? Very first time they go to Kyoshi Village where they meet Suki, right? That's part of his transformation, of his first breakdown of, here are these girls who are more powerful than me. And it's a great character moment that he has where he ends up needing to humble himself in order to become the warrior that he thinks that he is, or to live up to the expectation of his dad that he thinks he should. But it's funny with that overconfidence, he's trying to be here without any of the skills that would get him there. And so he actually has to, by humbling himself, he has to come back down to here and say, no, I got to start at square one where I've been looking down at everybody before. Yeah. And it's where tons of cool character growth happens.
It's so true. We could probably spend weeks on just Sokka's character development alone. What I think I want to jump in on here is that I love how in this moment here, I heard it said not too long ago, actually, that one of the best ways that you can create a story is to take the overall story and then take the portion that you're working on, this episode or this scene, and what is the story within the story. And what happens here is that you have Katara starting out as not very confident, not very good with her waterbending, like a little bit timid, a little bit shy, and Sokka's overconfident, over bravado, and then it flips to where now Katara's pissed at him. Now she gets overconfident, she gets angry and upset, and now Sokka becomes timid. And within this one little moment of like 2 minutes, you have a flipping, you have a story of the transition of each of these characters' emotional states of being. And it's just this little scene, like we're only like 2 minutes into the show, but like we've already gone through like a really interesting transition point. And like this little story within the story that's keeping us engaged all along the way and telling us information about these characters all throughout the process.
And it's awesome because this character flip really is reflected in season 3, right?
Jumping all the way to season 3.
Well, you think about like we will look at the overarching character, right? At the very, very end, right when they're about to have this climactic battle at the very end, what is each of these characters' primary drivers, right? Katara's become a crazy powerful waterbender, but now she has to be very careful about limiting that emotion so that it doesn't go over the edge and lead her to doing things that she regrets, hurting people, taking revenge, that kind of stuff. Whereas Sokka has the exact opposite. When he's finally more capable of being a leader, being a warrior, leading the invasion force, that's where he starts to lose his confidence. And so now he's got to be in the reverse section. So it is the very cool, like, it's this awesome idea where you almost see the entire arc of their characters that's going to happen over the next 60 episodes in this one 4-minute clip. If you can tell in the first couple of minutes of your show, how is this going to end? How is this going to progress? If it sets a theme that's consistent for the rest of your show, you've probably got something good on your hands.
Stop it!
I don't know if you notice this in the show, but there's almost like this dual tone between serious, funny, serious, funny.
Yes.
I think that's a great example where it goes from, we find Aang in the iceberg, it's like, here's this amazing thing, here it goes. And then he falls, and then Sokka's poking with the back end of his spear in this like super comedic. And so there's this real tonal, I almost want to call it, because it's not stark, it's almost like a tonal heartbeat, I want to say, where it's like back, forth, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah.
And it kind of moves its way through serious moment, funny moment, serious moment, funny moment.
I feel like we just keep harping on the same idea over and over again, but there's more dimensions to it. It's contrast.
Yeah.
It's the idea that the serious thing feels more serious when it's put next to something that's funny. The funny thing feels more funny when it's put next to something serious. But on top of that, I feel like in a way this show is telegraphing to the audience it's okay to have a range of emotions. You're going to experience a lot of different things. Sort of the way that Sokka and Katara were telegraphing maybe how their character development is going to go throughout the rest of the series. This is kind of telegraphing like, hey, it's okay to experience a lot of different things. There's going to be funny moments, there's going to be serious moments. We're going to go through all of them, and that's just set up in just like a little moment, and it's a throwaway thing, but it really does set up the tone for the rest of the series, because this is going to be what the rest of the show is like. A little bit of funny, a little bit of serious. We're going to go through all of the in-betweens along the way.
It almost moderates it in a way, right? Where it's like, we're going to be serious, but not that serious. Like somewhat, but like we can have some space between this and something really intense.
I need to ask you something.
What?
Please, come closer.
What is it?
Will you go penguin sledding with me?
That piece, I think, phenomenally sets up Aang's character too, right? Of like, because he has been training in a temple for, specifically with airbending, for as long as he's been alive, right? Like, this is somebody who is, despite what he looks like, incredibly prepared and capable. But you talk about contrast again. This is the very first thing we see, that serious, oh, come closer to, will you go penguin sledding? Like, this is a huge part of Kang's character. It's a huge part of Aang's character. And I feel like, I wanted to start on these three specifically, because I feel like with Sokka, with Katara, and with Aang, there's something really interesting about all three of them and their characters' relationships to responsibility.
Yes.
It's like Sokka starts as somebody who has, I'll put it this way.
I think I actually can say this really well.
Yeah.
So it feels to me like Sokka is the person who puts himself forward as the one who needs to take on responsibility, but doesn't really take it on. Yeah. Katara is the one who's actually taking on responsibility, and then Aang's the one who's trying to avoid responsibility.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I think especially with Aang and Katara, there's this sense of like Katara takes on responsibility for a lot of things.
But it goes under the radar.
And in a way, she almost does too much, right? As you go forward, there's this kind of interaction between her and other characters where there's like too mothering, there's too much, you're too in people's business. And she contrasts really well with Aang, who needs to be taking responsibility. He's the Avatar. He's the one who's going to save the world. But the very first thing he says is, let's go have fun and totally ignore what I am supposed to be doing. Let's forget the gravity of the situation. Let's take it easy. Let's be light and fun. Right?
Yeah.
And very, cool in the way that they've set this up where the bending techniques, especially in these core main characters, really reflect their personalities, which I think makes it a lot easier for us to connect with them. But that's where I see Aang's character having some wonderful contrast that I think makes him a good protagonist, is that he has responsibility, he has all this stuff, and he has the power, but where is his flaw? He runs from and avoids responsibility, right? We don't know this yet, but even meeting him in the iceberg, he is in the space of avoiding his responsibility because he ran away from being the Avatar, right? And so his entire character journey throughout this entire show is going to be, he gradually needs to learn how to take responsibility for his actions. And he doesn't get it right all the time, and it's not linear progression. His progression of responsibility is very much like that.
Yes.
Because there's sometimes where he does well, sometimes where he fails, and then there's similar pieces with Katara and Sokka, I think, with responsibility, where Katara in some ways needs to learn to let other people do their thing and not be so concerned and take so much control of things. And then Sokka needs to really learn, what does it actually mean to take responsibility? Not just play at or assume that you're taking responsibility, right? Not just look on the surface like you're responsible because you're the only guy left in the village, and so you're kind of put in charge, but like, what are you actually doing?
Finally. Uncle, do you realize what this means?
I won't get to finish my game.
It means my search. It's about to come to an end. That light came from an incredibly powerful source. It has to be him.
Oh, it's just the celestial light. We've been down this road before, Prince Zuko. I don't want you to get too excited over nothing.
There's two things that Iroh's introduction kind of spur in my mind.
Iroh specifically first.
Iroh specifically. The first thing that I'm kind of struck by is the fact that his character introduction is drinking tea and playing a strategy game. And what that says about his character. His character is the calming, the tranquil place, and he's also the character who strategizes and thinks ahead, plans things out, and he is... we talked about the king, magician, warrior, lover before. Yeah. This is 100% magician energy.
Yeah, very, very much so. Absolutely. Yeah. He's thinking, he's observing, and it has a lot to do with the way that, we'll see about this, because if we want to talk about Zuko and Iroh here, but when it comes to Iroh specifically, I think you think Iroh's the best written character.
No.
Really?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait, I was right.
About what?
Iroh's the best written character.
No.
Oh, no.
No.
You said correct, and I was like...
No, I said no, and you said, oh, I got it wrong, and then I said correct.
You can't say... you can't respond to I got it wrong with correct? How am I supposed to understand what that means?
I love how we've recorded this, so now everybody knows, like, who was actually... Anyways, maybe I'm totally wrong.
But okay, so that was my guess.
Okay,
so
incorrect.
Okay, well, I'm going to be very curious then. So what I love about this that goes really well with what you've noticed here with Iroh, and he's like his strategy, his magician energy. I think one of my favorite things about how he interacts with Zuko is that he is very hands-off. Not in terms of, like, he's not hands-off in terms of engaging with Zuko, but he really lets Zuko make all of his own choices.
Yes.
And this is contrast, because when we start to learn more about Iroh in the future, like, it is fascinating to me how much Iroh and Thor's are similar.
Yes.
Right? The greatest warrior in the world who gave up his life as a warrior because of the impact of his child. Thor's the birth of his daughter, Iroh, the death of his son. And both of them come to this position where they take on more of even like a king energy space, where both of them are now not so invested in their one particular group or clan, but they are both really invested in making sure that the world as a whole, everybody in humanity, is doing better and in a better place.
I think that's 100% spot on. What I find interesting, though, is we find that later on in the series, we really start to piece that together. But from the jump, from the get-go, Iroh is a bad guy, but he doesn't feel like a bad guy.
No, absolutely not. He is,
He tried to conquer Bossing Say.
Yep.
We find that out later on. He's not just like a Fire Nation warrior.
He's technically supposed to be the Fire Lord right now.
You are not just a bad guy. You're like the pinnacle bad guy.
Yep.
But we love him from the get-go.
He's a good guy wearing the bad guy team's jersey.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Which, in a lot of ways, how much does that tell you the theme of the entire show?
Oh, yeah.
Because like, to introduce a character like this, almost like in a yin yang way, where like Iroh is the good within the Fire Nation, and he's trying to spread the good to Zuko first, and then everybody else, because he has the wisdom where he's understanding balance, right? But the great thing about Iroh is how he's letting Zuko have his journey.
Yes,
he's there to support. He's not there to do anything for his nephew, even though, like, really, if he wanted to, the show would be over in episode 1, because it's Iroh gets off the boat, murks everybody, kills the Avatar, or takes the Avatar prisoner, and like then the show is done, right? Yeah. But because of his good nature, and because he's like, his primary purpose is not the Avatar, right? His primary purpose is not world domination. He doesn't care. His primary purpose is, I need to foster this child's well-being and development. Zuko and how he grows is my only priority. And I wish we could have included Iroh in our father's episode.
I did at the very end. So,
well, I mean, I wish we could have talked about him, because I feel like,
well, that would have taken away from this episode, though.
Yeah, I feel like, for the record, for anybody who looked at our father's episode and was like, I can't believe that you guys didn't talk about Iroh, my opinion is Iroh is top 3 fathers.
I would agree.
Like, if he's not on the same level as Thor's or above him, like, he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But his focus really is on how to develop this crown prince of the Fire Nation, Zuko, who, if we're honest, like, Iroh has a bit of a project on his hands, because Zuko is a piece of work at the beginning.
Yeah. And what I love about that too is that, just like we talked about with the other characters, that's foreshadowing how the series is going to end.
Yeah.
The thing that Iroh is most concerned about is developing this person into the leader that he can become. But right now he's banished. Like, you shouldn't be caring about developing this person into a leader.
Starting at the opposite point of his journey.
But the whole idea is that at the end of the show, he's going to become the Fire Nation leader, and he needs to be ready for that.
Yeah, and that comes to Iroh's strategy, where at the very beginning, first episode, he is thinking to the last episode.
Which is emblematic of the fact that he's playing a strategy game. It's like everything. I'm so happy that we're already getting into it. Every little choice of like what the characters are doing, what they're wearing, how they're acting, what their facial expressions are in each individual. Like, it all is being done for a reason, for a purpose, and it's got a long-term vision of why is this choice being made. You could have had Iroh doing anything. You chose to have him sitting down, having tea, playing out a strategy, thinking about the long term. This matters because this is telling you exactly how the show's going to play out. This is going to tell you about his character. This is contrasting Zuko and his problems. It's meticulously chosen and perfectly structured so that it's contrasting what it should contrast, and it's foreshadowing what it needs to foreshadow.
It's a great kind of way to represent this idea of maybe one of the principles of good writing that shows up in Avatar and why we connect with it. Everything is done for a reason.
There's an entire episode that I feel like just characterizes this perfectly. So, do you remember the episode where Katara and Toph were having their argument? Toph was pissed at Katara because she's being too motherly.
The scam episode.
The scam fun episode. I'm glad you remember it.
That honestly, that was one that I want to talk about because I love. It's funny because it's a filler kind of throwaway episode a little bit.
Don't need it.
Except character development.
Exactly. And what I love about that is that every character plays a role and every choice matters. So what you have is for people who haven't seen it, but yet what you have is you have Toph, you have Sokka, and you have Aang who kind of go out into town and be like, we can scam people. Like we can use Toph's earthbending to kind of scam the scammers and borderline become rich basically overnight. Katara has a problem with that. She and Toph kind of have this little tiff about it, and then Aang and Sokka are kind of caught in the middle of this. So you have two characters who are polar opposites, two characters who are caught in the middle. And one of the things that I loved is that Sokka, like now that they're rich, he's like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go buy myself a messenger bird. And it's like, okay, cool. But it feels like something that Sokka would do. It's like, we're rich now. I'm going to get this thing. That doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's dumb. It's silly, but it adds like that. To me, that's something that adds flavoring.
Yes. But the thing that I love about that is that at the end of the episode, you have this realization between Katara and Toph that like the reason that they're really not getting along is because of things that are deeper within their character. And for Toph, it's the fact that like I miss my parents. So what am I going to do? I'm going to send a message to my parents. And what did they use? They used Sokka's messenger bird. This throwaway thing that didn't matter, that could have just been like, whatever, funny little gag. It was used as a thing to end the story. And it was this little decision that it's like, it doesn't matter that the bird delivered a message to the thing. It's like, it doesn't matter. That doesn't change the story. But what it does is it showcases the fact that every decision that the writers make in this show, it is for a purpose. Something as simple as like, we're rich, so I'm going to buy a little bird. It's going to carry through and it's going to have something to do with the very end of the show. But I think the bigger thing on top of all of that is that seeing enough instances of that gives you trust and faith that this is a show that you can just sort of release yourself to. Like everything that's going to happen, it's for a purpose. And so maybe I don't understand something. Maybe something doesn't quite make sense to me. Don't worry. It's okay. The good writers are going to be here to tie everything together, to bring it through from start to finish. And it's okay to get lost in the story.
Zuko's not your favorite well-written character, is he? Is he? Is Zuko the best written character in the show?
I think that Zuko is the best written character.
But far and away?
Yeah.
Really?
100%.
So you need to explain to me why.
I will do so by the end of the episode.
Okay.
We are going to, should we just get into Zuko?
Let's get into Zuko.
Okay, cool. What is the...
Because I might disagree, actually. At least if you think it's Zuko, I want to propose an alternative character that I think might be done really well.
Okay. You tell me. Okay, is it Iroh? Do you think Iroh is the best written character?
No, Iroh's not the one that I want to contrast. So we'll get there. But you talk about Zuko first and why you think he's the best written character.
Let's start with the basics. What is Zuko's biggest problem?
He has lost his honor.
More of an internal emotional state of being.
Ooh, that's a good question, actually. Could be like bitterness, could be anger, could be rage, could be all that kind of stuff.
100% anger. Do you remember the beach scene?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole idea that everything, the emotional undergirding of like, why does Zuko need to restore his honor? Why does he need to capture the Avatar? He's angry.
I'm back home now. My dad talks to me. He even thinks I'm a hero. Everything should be perfect, right? I should be happy now. But I'm not. I'm angrier than ever and I don't know why.
There's a simple question you need to answer then. Who are you angry at?
No one. I'm just angry.
Yeah. Who are you angry at, Zuko?
Everyone. I don't know.
Is it Dad?
No.
Your uncle? Me?
No.
Then who? Who are you angry at?
Answer the question, Zuko.
Talk to us.
Come on, answer the question.
Come on, answer it.
I'm angry at myself.
His entire arc is sort of hidden under the surface until this scene. So you're never explicitly told that the secret, the reason that he's sort of experiencing all these problems is because of his anger. And it's not just anger at the world. It's like it's anger at himself.
Yeah, you can see that he's a pretty pent up and angry person, but where that's directed.
Yeah. But what I love is that like throughout the show, it's like, I need to restore my honor. I need to capture the Avatar.
It's like a misdirect.
I need to win my father's approval.
He's looking everywhere else.
Yeah. Why do you need to do all these things? It's because I'm angry at myself and I need to fix this thing. I'm going to fix it externally. I'm not going to deal with the problem internally. I'm going to fix everything around it because there's this thing inside of me, the thing that's driving my firebending. And like, what is the most stereotypical thing about like people who have the ability to use fire? It's like they're angry.
Rage.
And what I love is the fact that like when he has another moment too where he joins the Avatar. And then what happens? He loses his ability to firebend.
But this really connects with you for some reason. Like you're getting emotional talking about this.
I think I definitely connected most with Zuko.
So you resonate with him.
100%. And that's definitely coloring my interpretation. But I think I would argue that the way that his arc was structured was so nuanced and so well thought out. And the fact that everything that he's doing is contrasted with Aang's development. Every so often, you'll see that there's these crosscuts where like Aang's doing something, Aang's learning, Aang's developing, and then they crosscut to what's Zuko doing? So in a way, it feels like Zuko is not just a character. He's almost like a deuteragonist. He's the secondary main character.
Very much feels that way.
It sort of mimics, well, I mean,
Roku and Sozin.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about symbolism in a bit, but I feel like just briefly to put it in here when you're talking about Zuko and Aang and their relationship. Again, one of the most phenomenal things that I think shows how meticulous the writers and the creators of the show were and how they put this together is exactly what you're talking about. Aang and Zuko's relationship is, I want to call it an inverse mirror of Roku and Sozin's relationship. Roku and Sozin start friends. They drift apart. They fall into conflict. One ends up more or less killing the other one. And that leads to all the negative things that happen in the show moving forward. The show is resolved by Aang and Zuko, who start as enemies, coming together, creating a friendship, and dealing with the problem together. And there's something so satisfying about that. However, it's also really hidden because this time running through the show was the first time that I noticed that.
Really?
Yeah, that this was because the other times that I've done this, I wasn't really watching this like somebody who was dissecting it like a writer. I was just kind of watching to enjoy it.
Yes.
So it kind of sits under the surface, but it's this very cool element of the show that I think holds it together without being too in your face.
Yes.
Like nobody's sitting there saying, wow, it's like Aang and Zuko just fixed all the things that started with the relationship breakdown between Sozin and Roku. Like nobody says it explicitly, which would kind of not be great.
But I think that's important though. I think it's important to have things that are just a little bit out of grasp.
Yeah.
You want people to not work to be able to digest the story that you're telling, but you want their mind to be active. You want them to be searching for things, to look for little things. It's like people get really excited over things like little Easter eggs or little hidden secrets. Like why? Because it's that little puzzle piece that you want to be able to fit in. It's like, in my opinion, the best stories, the best ones are where they're structured like a puzzle piece with just a few pieces missing, and you've been given a few pieces around and you get to use your mind to figure out, does this go here? Does this go here? And when you're activated like that, the reason that I think that that's so important is not just because, ooh, your mind's active. What it does is it's giving you ownership over the story. It's like you weren't told, put this piece here. What you did is you saw the piece, you saw the hole, and you're like, I'm going to put that there. It fits. This works. I did that. I'm invested now in the story.
But at the same time, you don't need to be putting all the puzzle pieces in to appreciate the picture that the puzzle creates at the end.
Oh, exactly.
So you have the best of both worlds. If you want to engage with it, you can, but you can also just kind of sit back and enjoy the ride if you want to.
Totally.
There's something that when you described Zuko and you said I don't know if it was like he's the most like real feeling or like cohesive character.
His arc feels the most tangible.
It's funny because I feel like there's something about when you say Zuko is the most well-written character, he's also the character who has to deal with the most conflict.
Yes.
Like he is the most, I guess you would say, almost like split in who he is. That's his entire piece. So he's not necessarily a cohesive person, but I wonder if that almost is like a benefit to the way that he's written.
I think it is.
It feels like that split gives him more depth.
Well, the split causes an internal conflict. I think the scene that really emphasizes this the most is when he actually gets sick. Like he physically gets sick. And then Iroh says this. He says, "You are at war with your own mind and body." So I actually have a question. So what's portrayed in the show is that because Zuko has internal emotional, psychological conflict with his own ideologies that are at war within himself, he gets physically sick. Yeah. Is there something within the realm of psychology that is this true? Is this something that's real?
Yeah, I actually think so. I think this is a reflection of reality because it's not gonna. There's a few things. It's not necessarily going to be directly like getting physically ill. Yeah. Although the more that we're learning about the nervous system, the more that we're finding that perhaps the root of a lot of different physical ailments is going to come down to what is the state of your psyche and your mind. So there might be something to that. But I think just generally on a more symbolic level, something that I notice a lot with the clients that I work with is that the more there is a difference between the person that they present on the outside and the person who they feel like they are on the inside, the more they will be under stress and tension, the more hyper-arousal that you'll see, the more distress that they'll be in psychologically. It's always the case when somebody, like a contrast in needs that I will see a lot, or in presentation needs, is somebody who puts everybody else's needs ahead of their own, service, caretaker. And consistently for a long time, they will repress and ignore their own needs. But that dismissal of what you need and what is important to you, it can't stay down there all the time. It's like having a beach ball and trying to push it underwater. It takes energy and effort to put it down there. So what people might find is that if they're in that kind of state, they might be like, why am I so exhausted? Why am I tired all the time? And it's like lots of physical reasons for that, but it can also be because you're investing lots of mental energy in pushing down something that you don't feel like you can deal with right now. But then at some point, that is going to leak out into other places in your life, or if you kind of take your hand off the ball for any moment of time, it'll find that, it'll find that space and that difference in pressure, and it's going to shoot straight to the surface.
Totally.
So I absolutely see that being something that I deal with clients oftentimes. The more conflict that there is internally, the more distress there is. It's just kind of a really easy way to symbolize that with a physical illness in a show like that.
Yeah. I think that's really cool how there maybe, I don't think the show writers were looking at the most recent psychological research and being like, well, when you have internal conflict within yourself, you can actually get physically sick. Yeah. But they wrote that, and it seems to be kind of true.
It feels right? Like it's intuitive to us.
Yeah. And then maybe retroactively we'll look back and be like, this actually has a lot of data now to prove that that was correct the whole time.
Yep.
But I think, what do you think that comes from? Because we'll get back to Zuko in a second. The thing that I'm questioning is why does it seem like every decision and every choice that's made is so right?
I don't know. I feel like that's a thing that's hard to unpack, I think, from the outside.
Yeah.
I think if we ever had the chance to sit down with the show writers and figure out what was your process? Walk us through when you first made this show. How did you structure it at the beginning? How did you start? Because I feel like understanding what they did in order to create this is going to be, especially starting at the beginning, right? At the genesis point, at the origins of what you did, is going to be way easier to figure out what that mechanic is than trying to figure it out after it's all spread out and dispersed and trying to do it from the end result, right? I feel like it's hard to articulate a particular point other than just like, well, it's just good writing. These guys are good writers, right? They know what they're doing. And if I was going to throw a guess out about it, I would say this kind of goes back to our second episode. And it's something that actually we saw in the comments a lot, which is shout out to Senior Pink Gang.
Holy cow.
Throw a hard boiled in the comments if you're still here with us. And thank you so much for the crazy boost in subscribers and viewership that we got recently.
I feel like it's a little bit weird. Like, it feels way after the fact that we're maybe addressing this in a video form. But
yeah, but like, holy smokes.
Just the way things worked out. It's like, we couldn't really say that until now. But like, wow, thank you.
Yeah.
Holy cow. We didn't realize that Senior Pink had, like, we knew that he was amazing and cool and like had a lot of pull in the One Piece community, but oh my goodness, like we underestimated.
All showed up in force.
Yikes.
So one of the things that a lot of people were commenting in that video was, or something that I don't remember if it was, I think it was actually Grand Line Reviews that made this comment for us. Where he had said what Oda does in his writing is that he gives every single character a backstory, but you just never see it because he doesn't put it into the manga or doesn't get into the anime. And for Senior Pink, it was because his editor saw this. He was like, you can't not put this guy's backstory in the show. And so he kind of convinced Oda to stick it in there. And I feel like that's a great writing technique to be using, is when you write everybody with these backstories and these histories, and those backstories and histories give them motivation so that there's a cohesiveness to their action. So if I was going to throw out a guess as to why these guys have written it so well and there's so few missteps, I think a lot of it comes down to they probably wrote the history of these characters first. They said, where did they come from? And then once they get them to the beginning of the series, it was then, okay, given where they've been and where they are now, they've got 2 points. Now that gives them trajectory, rather than just starting a character at a point and saying, well, we'll make them go in this direction. And then you have to backtrack their history to kind of align with the direction that you've put them in.
Yeah.
Which is probably way harder to do.
True, yeah. It feels like you brought this up back in the Cyberpunk episode, where one thing that you said, I think it was really, really accurately stated, is that one of the best things you can do in writing a characters is put them in a situation and just like, what would they do? Based on their circumstance, based on their scenario, how would they react? Not like saying point A to point B, you go here through this path, but it's like, you have these 2 points. Based on where this character is, what route will they take?
Yeah.
Like, you have mountain, ocean, river, forest. This character has so many different options about how they could get to that other point. Which route would they take based on their circumstances, based on their background? And you don't know that unless you've taken the time to write that out. So maybe the I guess the secret answer, I guess you've said it, but maybe a good way to articulate it is that the best written characters come from writers who just put in the work.
Yeah. Or it's like, create characters before you write the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Have whole people that you start to engage with before you get there. I feel like if I was going to contend you for best written character, I don't know if I would say the character's story arc is as good as Zuko's, but I think in terms of like just what the writers were able to pull off, I think this is a character who stands out to me, not just in this show, but in media as a whole for what they represent.
Is it one of the 7?
It is one of the 7.
I'm going to take a guess.
Go for it.
Is it Sokka?
No.
Is it Katara?
No.
It's Toph.
It is. Like,
so in editing, I'm just going to start off with, it's Toph.
You are not. No, I'm going to force you to include the 2 mistakes, the 2 missed guesses. No, it's like
Jordan, future Jordan, don't put that in. Make me look good.
I feel like Toph is probably one of the best constructed characters for a number of reasons, especially because I think today there's in Hollywood, in stories in general, there's lots of people. I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I want to say there's lots of people trying to create a powerful female character that audiences connect with, right? And I want to be as generous as possible and say, like, they're not just worried about making powerful female characters for their own sake. I imagine that most writers are going to say they also want their characters to be appreciated by the audience, right? Whether, like, villains we can appreciate, protagonists we can appreciate, right, in different ways. I think Toph has very much a Senior Pink vibe in terms of like loyalty in a fan base where that character is not one of the main characters, right? She's an important character.
Yeah.
She's not Aang or Zuko.
Correct.
And she's not there for like half of the show. Yet she's got a ravenous fan base. And it totally makes sense to me why. Because the way that she's built and her introduction is fantastic. It's like you have the most powerful earthbender, arguably, that you will see in the show, right? Insanely capable. And then you give her a weakness in being blind, right? And so she has so many pieces that I feel like for people who are trying to do that more modern writing of female characters now, if you're not looking at Toph as an example of what you should be doing, then you're looking in the wrong spot, right? Female character, disability, is a certified badass and everybody loves her, right? Like you've got to be looking at her as the template.
Yeah.
And it's great because she also has an element of depth to her character as well that gets developed over those first couple episodes where she's in, where she's got all this power and she's got all the strength, but what does she struggle with? She struggles with relationships with other people because she's been so used to this, I need to be independent because of the way that my parents way overdoted with me. They didn't believe me. They didn't care me. And now my set framework and structure for interacting with the world is carry my own weight, right? First episode that she joins the group, that's the conflict between her and Katara is, I don't help out everybody else, but I'm carrying my own weight because I'm independent. I can do what I need to. And her path and her journey is so interesting because it's this almost softening to relationships with other people, right? To where at the end, it's really cool to me that the climax of her story is with Sokka and Suki on the airships in a place where she's actually really vulnerable.
Yeah,
like
actually.
She's got so much capability in terms of metal bending, right? Like she is the best person to have there.
She literally invented a new form of bending.
Exactly.
Just
crazy prodigy, but she's not grounded. She's actually blind now, right? Which is wonderfully put in the scene where she's looking out the window when Ozai is like starting to burn the Earth King to the ground. And she's like, wow, that's a lot of fire, isn't it? Like the idea that it's so intense that she can experience that even though she can't see it. It's like, that feels really intense. It gives this great framework of how she's now at her most vulnerable, disconnected from the thing that gives her the most stability, which is the literal ground and earth. And she needs the other two characters in that scene in order to be capable, right? When it really counts, at the climax, at the height of where she's needed, she needs to reach out and rely on other people. And it's cool too how it kind of mirrors nicely with having Sokka there because his is supporting other people, right? And so he's got to be there to support Toph in what she's doing, right? Help her, guide her, give her instructions, but he's not the one who's doing all the stuff. He's like, no, Toph, you bend the metal to turn the airship so that it crashes into everything else. He can't do it, but he's got to help her to facilitate her using her power to its best ability. So it's this wonderful blending of these characters, and I feel like she adds so much interesting personality. That's the other thing too, is she's got a phenomenally developed personality. She's like, so you know what, you know what it is? She is Sokka with actual skills, is what it is. She's Sokka who actually has earned the confidence because she is the best earthbender that there is. So, I mean, still that confidence does get in the way a little bit and it creates some problems and conflicts in the show, but it's also something where like it adds this fun flavor to things, right? And she's a super funny character. She's got like, her personality is big in a slightly different way than Sokka's, in a way that works nicely with everybody else in the group.
And kind of contrasts her size as well.
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
If I'm being honest, I think Toph is probably my favorite character.
I
just don't necessarily think, I don't think she resonated as much with me. And I don't think that she feels like the best written, supportive supporting character.
Yeah.
But to have that like best written character, it feels like there needed to be a little bit more of a centrality to it.
That's totally
maybe
fair.
I'm a little bit biased, but
it's hard when you're having to pick between like 1, A, B, and C. And
Yeah.
it's like who was best written out of all these amazingly written characters.
what a wonderful problem to have. This amazing show. Which characters are the best? Oh, there's so many to choose from.
Exactly.
But I think you talked about her weakness kind of lending itself to so many different aspects. Some of the funniest moments of the whole show are those little blind jokes that are thrown in there.
Which is interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because I don't know how to feel about this quite yet. Because I know that right now in culture, this is a little bit of a controversial thing. But there's a part that almost feels like by making some of those, especially because she's the one making jokes about being blind, there's almost like a normalizing piece to it.
Yeah.
Like this is just something that happens. And I don't know how many people feel that way these days or agree with that, right? Like there's whole pieces around there that we don't have to get into about that stuff because that's not the point. But it's a curiosity that I have that I wonder, like, is the pathway towards normalizing some of these challenges that certain people face, let's say, their own ability to treat it more lightly? And does that ability come with discovering capacities in other areas so that you have something else to lean on in order to not feel like there's so much of a detriment because of that limitation? Like, would Toph have been able to actually make any of those jokes if she wasn't as powerful as an earthbender as she was?
I really appreciated how the introduction to Toph, like you mentioned before, kind of contrasted her as like this tiny little person who could take on anybody.
Yeah.
But it also contrasted her as the person, the exact person that Aang needed.
Yeah.
So King Boomy right beforehand said that, like, I can't teach you. Like, I am theoretically like maybe the best earthbending teacher. And he's like, nope, not me.
Yeah.
Because you need something different. You need somebody who will wait and listen.
You need to find someone who waits and listens before striking.
And then the exact two things that we see Toph do first is like, like I can't see, so I need to wait and I need to listen. Like this is like how I engage with my surroundings. So,
and the great thing about that too is, and maybe this again goes to the way that the writers have structured this in such a detailed way where they give you hints about this.
Yes.
Is, I don't know if you remember at the very last episode when Aang finally beats Ozai.
Yes.
He's gone to the Avatar state. He's done all this stuff. And then he chooses not to kill him.
Yes.
And then when Ozai goes to attack him, how does Aang not get killed? It shifts into exactly the same visuals as Toph uses when she's earthbending, where Ozai moves and it's Aang has got that like sensory ability or that kind of ground sense of, okay, he's moving, and without looking at him, he can pivot around.
I didn't catch that.
So it's cool to me how, like, that's not just this is how you need to learn, but this is actually going to be specifically utilized in the very last episode, in the culmination of the fight. Here's where we take this thing that we needed you to use and we actually utilize it.
It's cool too how like that's only possible because that is exactly what Toph learned because of her weakness.
Yeah.
Like the thing that Aang needed as his strength was the thing that was developed because of another character's weakness.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you need both of those things. And maybe, gosh, I think you mentioned she might be one of the best written, powerful female characters.
Yeah.
I think Toph might be every far left progressive writer's dream, but they just, for some reason, have an aversion to it. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's like, in my mind, that what you said is spot on. It's like she is exactly everybody's dream about what a strong female character should be. Yeah. Everybody loves her. She's powerful. She contends. She can hold her own. That's her character.
She checks all the boxes.
But the thing that separates her is that she has a weakness. And I don't know what it is about people's aversion to writing characters who are emulatable and weak at the same time. Like it feels to me like there's maybe in Hollywood in general, there seems to be this predilection that what you need to do in order to write somebody who's emulatable is somebody who does not have weaknesses.
Yeah.
And it's not this idea of them overcoming their weaknesses. It's something that like they can't have any flaws to begin with.
So I have a potential answer to that.
Okay.
From a psychological perspective.
Okay.
From something in this show.
Oh, perfect.
There is one more character that we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
That I feel like is a fascinating character for me.
Yeah.
As a therapist.
Yes. Let's hear it.
We're looking at Azula.
Almost perfect. One hair out of place.
Almost isn't good enough.
In this episode, it's the second time that we see her. And to me, it is the most revealing of her character and her character arc. And it's a beautiful, again, show, don't tell example of how to present a character so that we know exactly what they're about.
So good.
And this is coming right after we see her ordering people around saying, oh, I'm sorry that you can't go in because of the tides. Who controls the tides? Essentially, she's saying to her crewmen, like, who controls your life, the tides or me? Okay, so you need to go against physics and the natural laws of the world because I'm more powerful. And she is set up wonderfully as, I would say, even more so than Ozai. We don't really see the big bad of the show for most of it, especially we don't see him utilizing any of his power until the very end. So Azula's kind of the representation of the highest ranking power in the Fire Nation that is against everybody else who's the protagonists in the show. And she's presented so well because she's like flawless technique, totally put together, in control 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? She's got this element of perfection, which one of the kind of biggest contrasts between her and her brother and Zuko is that like she's the perfect child. He is the literal black sheep, the banished child, right? But in this moment, at the very beginning of her introduction, we see there's one hair out of place, almost isn't good enough, and we're going to see a progression of her as she kind of continues to go to almost, not quite. It starts to unravel for her. And phenomenal use of symbolism that we are shown almost isn't good enough for her with her hair. And then at the very end of the series, when she's going through her coronation, how do we know that she's unraveling? Her hair is a mess, right? Now, obviously, that's, you know, a traditional or very common way for you to show a character's mental state is by their hair being messy. But the fact that like a season apart, the beginning of season 2 to the end of season 3, the writers keep the metaphor that they are using consistent. And they go from one hair out of place to she's slicing off all her hair and has totally lost control, right? So that shows me phenomenal writing. And also, Azula's the bad guy, and yet we still connect with her a little bit because she has that little piece of a flaw that makes her feel at least somewhat human, right? Love this character introduction. Love her as an antagonist. Love her as somebody that everybody else has to try to overcome, right?
I think what I love is that I think Azula's character introduction is really a great microcosm to something that's done throughout the series, is that a really tiny moment can be emblematic of so many things. Yeah. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of like, I need to explain, like, this is the backstory, this is this character. It's like, that can all be summarized in just like a little moment, a little moment that's a representation of something much larger. And I think the reason that people don't do that as much is because it's really hard to find really great symbolic, emblematic examples.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. But something that really does, I think, is valuable is that it saves, I would imagine, it saves so much time.
Yeah.
And it's cool because then you can be doing two different things at once. You can be driving the plot forward with what's going on, but then with the side things that are happening, you can also be developing character.
Do you remember when Aang meets the monk, Guru Patik, where doing two things at the same time with multiple different characters, you can be really efficient with your writing if you structure things properly. So what happens is that while Aang's learning about the connection between the different elements, what Toph's doing is learning metal bending. So like you have this extra skill set that's like this nuance between like how the elements all kind of interplay, and Aang's learning exactly the same thing. You have one person's character development in one area happening at the same time as another's, and there's a link between them, and it's more powerful than if either of those were done separately, and you can save time by showing them in the same light at the same time, and you have the same energy and the same feeling that's going into each of them, so you process them at the same time.
Well, it's cool because it's almost like Guru Patik is narrating Toph's moment of developing metal bending.
Everything is connected.
That's right. Even the separation of the 4 elements is an illusion. If you open your mind, you will see that all the elements are one, 4 parts of the same whole. Even metal is just a part of Earth that has been purified and refined.
Even and so it's that weaving thing that happens where it's like Aang's story goes into Toph's story and then kind of comes back and forth. So it really does connect them really well.
So true.
And it does give a lot more gravity and sense of purpose and meaning to Toph developing metal bending beyond just she needs to get out of here, right? It's, I think, in a lot of ways, it's what takes that moment and takes it from potentially being a Deus Ex Machina moment to actually having some layers of meaning that push through other themes and elements of the story at the same time.
Exactly.
Right. So it's this really useful vehicle for what the story is about, not just like, we need this thing to happen narratively, so just make it happen. Well, if we're going to talk about that episode.
We're going to talk about that episode. Sorry. I could.
Boo.
That was bad.
That was bad. Really bad.
I'm sorry.
If we're going to talk about the Guru Patik episode,
yes,
we should probably actually just talk about the.
Let's go into it.
Because when we look at it from a psychological perspective, like,
yes,
there's so much fascinating stuff with that. Can we pull up season 2, episode 19? Did you notice the almost, I want to call it like Star Wars homage?
No.
So the way that Aang leaves his training with Guru Patik is exactly the same way that Luke leaves his training with Yoda. Yeah.
I see it
the
now.
exact same context. I get a spiritual vision that my friend and someone that, not even my friend, somebody that I love and that I care about is in danger.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to abandon my training early before I've mastered things to go try to deal with this. And the mentor tells me, don't go try to save this person right away. So you have to stay here and deal with this right now.
Yes.
So exactly the same process that takes place.
Oh my goodness. How did I not catch that? That's so obvious now that you pointed out.
Right?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I wonder how much the show writers were actually calling back to that original plot point in Star Wars, or if that's just an emblematic, archetypal storyline.
Well, it makes me curious, but like, what is the idea of leaving your training early to deal with what feels like an immediate threat?
Why is that something that we resonate with? Why does it feel like that comes up multiple times?
Yeah, why is it thematic? I kind of feel like there's a couple things that might be going on with that. I think one of those things might be, in both cases with Luke and Aang, there is an attempt to try to develop and harness a power. But then both of them get this call to utilize that power before they're really ready and prepared, right? Aang hasn't actually integrated his 7th chakra state. Luke hasn't fully mastered the Force and what he's capable of doing. And the idea that I think both of their mentors are telling them is that you are actually going to like fail or suffer a consequence of some kind if you go to deal with the problem now before you're ready. And what results in it is that both characters end up getting hurt, right? So Luke loses his hand, Aang gets electrocuted and loses the ability to go into the avatar state.
Yes.
So it's almost like by trying to deal with those problems before you're ready, you lose the capacity to deal with those problems in the future.
That makes a lot of sense. I think there's also, in my mind, when you're saying that, it brings up this idea that developing a capability is almost more harmful or dangerous unless you've gotten to a certain point. It's completely a different field of interest, but I heard it said about self-driving cars that the most dangerous timeline position of the self-driving cars is the crossover point between self-driving and human driving. It's like, it's not the idea of like 1 or 2 self-driving cars. It's the idea of like, when are we transitioning from one to the other?
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost worse to have learned this thing unless you bring it to completion, unless you bring it to a stage where you're actually able to control it.
Huh.
Because I think in Luke's case, this breeds confidence. I can do this stuff now. So I'm ready to do this thing.
I'm ready to face Vader.
Yeah.
You are absolutely not ready to face Vader.
You've definitely improved. You've definitely grown. You have more skills and abilities, but this has almost breeded a false confidence inside of you.
And then what Guru Patik says to Aang is that if you go now, you won't be able to access the Avatar state, which ends up being true, and that he doesn't.
Is kind of interesting. When he said that, I originally interpreted that as just you are partway through the process now. It's like transferring a file and then ripping out the plug of your computer. It's like you're just going to corrupt it.
Yeah.
And like that's not what was the case, but it kind of ended up being exactly what happened. He gets shocked midway through, and he's not able to actually access that seventh chakra state.
Yeah. There's another element too where Patik is actually explaining to Aang the way that the chakra pools work in the story, and it feels like there's phenomenal psychological metaphors there, right? So
100%.
I'd be curious to hear what you think these are.
The water flows through this creek much like the energy flows through your body. As you see, there are several pools where the water swirls around before flowing on. These pools are like our chakras.
So chakras are pools of spiraling energy in our bodies?
Exactly. If nothing else were around, this creek would flow pure and clear. However, life is messy, and things tend to fall in the creek. And then what happens?
The creek can't flow?
Yes, but if we open the paths between the pools,
the energy flows.
So even that part by itself, I'd be curious if we just looked at that explanation that he gives and think about, like, how does that strike you?
The flowing between pools of chakra. I don't know much about like Eastern religious chakra beliefs and like more of the nuances of that. So I'm gonna just focus on like what I can get out of it, which is that I don't think he's referencing this, but for some reason, like all I'm thinking is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And like you need to start at the base and you need to progress upwards. And wherever there's a block, it's going to prevent you from going to the next level.
There's a fascinating parallel and overlap between Maslow's hierarchy and the chakra alignment.
Oh, good. So I'm not just an idiot for like...
No, I mean like both of those they're fascinating because you think about, we'll kind of spoil it a little bit for here, but like where does Maslow's hierarchy start? It starts with your survival needs. Yeah. Where does the chakra chain start? It starts at the base of the spine, which is dealing with everything about survival.
Right.
Right. So
Fight
I think,
or flight.
they very much mirror each other, I think, in how they develop. So there's that piece. What I feel like I notice when he's talking about things getting stuck, right? Life is messy. Stuff gets stuck in the creek. When I hear him talking about that as a therapist, what I'm hearing is less about the emotional states and more about like stuff in life happens and bad things in life happen. And how much do we end up holding on to those things? And how much do those things begin to influence the way that our emotions move, right? Less about the emotions themselves being bad or negative or blocked up, and more so of how are your experience of life influencing the way that your emotions flow and function, right? So as a basic premise, just like things in life will happen, they will get blocked up, and when you start to clear those things out, your emotional, psychological state will start to flow and feel better, I think is a great way to simplify mental health in general.
So when I saw this originally, I interpreted it as emotions, but you're jumping all the way to mental health in general.
Yeah, it's like the blocked up creek could be blocked up anywhere along here.
I see.
And that could lead to any amount of different symptoms that somebody might experience, right? Where they get blocked up might have an impact on what that looks like. So just the general idea that your mental health, and maybe it's a good way maybe it's why I want people to think about their mental health this way, using this analogy, is that mental health is oftentimes, not for everybody, not all the time, but I think for a vast majority of us, less like an illness and more like stuff is blocked. So if we treated it like an illness and said, you're just broken, you're defective, you're wrong, rather than something's jammed up inside.
Yeah.
Like your car isn't busted and broken and horrible. Like something's gotten into some of the mechanics and we need to swap out a part or we need to clear something out, right? Semi-disgusting story. My phone wasn't working my phone jack was like all messed up.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up doing, and maybe this is good for if you ever end up having this happen to your phone, don't go to a repair shop. I saw a video where this guy was cleaning stuff out and I was like, oh, maybe I should try that. So I like got some tweezers and started going into the USB-C port, and I cleared out so much lint. Like there was so much lint in my phone's USB-C from just sitting in my pocket. Cleared it out, started working fine again.
Oh, perfect.
Right? So I think that's kind of the analogy, their idea of the phone wasn't broken.
Yeah.
It had stuff that had collected in it that was blocking it up.
Because life's messy.
We don't live in a petri dish. We don't live in a vacuum. We interact with things on a daily basis. If you think that nothing's going to have an impact on you, you are lying to yourself. So part of our responsibility for good mental health is, are we consistently clearing out the stuff? Like you got to eat consistently if you want to stay healthy. You got to sleep consistently if you want to stay healthy. You got to move your body if you want to stay healthy consistently. You got to make sure that you're checking in and clearing out your emotional space if you want to be maintaining good emotional and mental health for the vast majority of us.
There are 7 chakras that go up the body. Each pool of energy has a purpose and can be blocked by a specific kind of emotional muck. Be warned. Opening the chakras is an intense experience, and once you begin this process, you cannot stop until all 7 are open.
First part is true. It can be a very intense process. The second part is just for the story. It's not for actual people. That's not. You can pause and take breaks, and like you don't have to. Once you start, you've just got to go through the whole thing.
You can start dealing with your trauma and stop and take a break before reaching enlightenment. It's okay.
Yeah, take your time. Take your time is really important. Yeah.
You said before that it feels like what he was like Luke with Master Yoda. Now that you say that, this just feels like Dagobah. Like it just feels the same. The rolling fog, the dark atmosphere. Sort of feels like this, like looking within
in a cave.
Yeah.
In a weird, semi-hostile forest.
Yeah. It like both of those environments really feel like looking within for some reason. And I don't know what it is about it, but they really capture that feeling state inside of yourself.
I feel like they might be making a reference to Dagobah here. Possibly.
First, we will open the Earth Chakra, located at the base of the spine. It deals with survival and is blocked by fear. What are you most afraid of? Let your fears become clear to you. Aang, your vision is not real. You are concerned for your survival, but you must surrender those fears. Let your fears flow down the creek. You have opened your Earth Chakra.
As a whole framework, I really like how this is laid out. I don't know how robust or complete it is when it comes to describing the entirety of your mental health. Like if we look at the way that they have organized the chakra pools here, they base it off of the chakras from Eastern spirituality that we have in the real world. So there's your earth chakra, your water chakra, your fire chakra, heart, sound, light, thought. And they're all aligned with the different chakras that we normally have. And they all deal with different things, right? So there's survival, pleasure, willpower, love, truth, insight, and then cosmic energy. And the thing that's interesting is where he describes how they're blocked, right? Fear, guilt, shame, grief, lies, illusion, and attachment. And I don't know how complete of a list that is for the things that we deal with that could be the emotional muck like you were talking about. But I do like it at the very least as a tangible starting framework for people to utilize, because I think lots of this stuff is absolutely true, right? How do we deal with our fear? How do we deal with our guilt? How do we deal with our shame, our grief, and the illusions and the lies that we tell ourselves? Even if we were just addressing those, you'd already have people doing so much good work in therapy and other self-development processes, right? Probably important for people to know that it's obvious, I think. It takes more than what Aang does. Like this is put on times 100 speed, the process that it goes. You can't just go, and then release it.
Yeah.
But
I've dealt with all of my internal trauma and baggage.
It doesn't happen just by breathing once. But I think the process that they have to go through is cool, how the gurus start to talk about what are the things and the mechanics of how you address this, right? How do you deal with your fear when it comes to your survival needs? Part of it comes down to acceptance is really important. Like, you need to accept the fact that you are mortal, that you are finite, and that at some point, all of us are going to die. If you don't accept that, if you don't allow that to be integrated as a part of your experience, it'll always kind of be separated off, and you're always going to struggle with that. There's always going to be this fear present. But when your perception of reality lines up with reality, I am mortal, I am finite, my life is at risk, but that is something that I'm willing to accept as a possible consequence of what I need to do, then the fear begins to dissipate. Right? So, and he does this through all the different ones, which is really, really cool. And I love how he kind of goes through each of them and what does it take to resolve each one of these pieces of emotional muck that gets stuck.
Next is the
Water chakra?
brilliant. Maybe one day you will be a guru too. This chakra deals with pleasure and is blocked by guilt. Now, look at all the guilt which burdens you so. What do you blame yourself for?
I ran away. I hurt all of those people.
Accept the reality that these things happened, but do not let them cloud and poison your energy. If you are to be a positive influence on the world, you need to forgive yourself.
I love how, from a filmmaking perspective, they really shorten up the process in a very symbolic way that still feels like you're accomplishing a lot.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of sound design. Like the whole idea, like this little ding. It's like this. All it is this simple little choice. All you needed to do is like put this little sound effect in, but that conveys so much information, and that's going to be used as a shortcut instead of Guru Patik saying like, you have now opened this chakra. What it is, you heard him say that for the first one, and now this symbol, this little auditory symbol, is just like second one, and then it's going to keep going, third one, fourth.
Yeah, but even though you're doing the shortcut, it's like you're still taking care of your audience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like you're left to assume that or imagine that, or you don't have to say it right in their face.
Yeah.
It's, we're going to give you this cue that subconsciously you'll understand. Kind of.
The way that I put it is that you're teaching them the language of film through your film. You're teaching somebody a language and how to understand what you're doing, but you're doing it in such a way that they're learning while doing.
Yeah.
It's like learning to ride a bike for your viewing experience.
Yeah. How do you learn? Get on.
Yeah, do it.
And we'll do it along the way, and you'll feel the balance and you'll figure it out. There was a part that I really liked about that where he talks about forgiveness, right? And the idea, it seems a lot like when it comes to guilt and for people clearing out guilt. One is that it feels a lot like when people think about their relationship to guilt. Something important to note here is that what Aang is looking at is the things that he did, right? I hurt people. I ran away. With guilt being mostly about the things that you have done, shame and the difference between guilt and shame. The shame is more about who you are, how you see yourself, self-perception.
Yeah.
Right. And it's cool how what Guru Patik is saying here is that the way to navigate the errors that you've committed is you have to learn how to forgive yourself. It's almost like you have to learn to integrate the process of making mistakes.
Yes.
It's like we can't continue to sit and live in the past and our mistakes, or we will stay back there and it's going to hamper our growth. We have to be able to move forward and start to say, like, my mistakes happened. What have I learned from it? What am I going to do with it? How is it going to change me? But then the importance of forgiveness is that by forgiving myself, I actually allow myself to move forward to, like he says, in order to be effective, in order to continue to help people, you have to be there to help them. So if you don't forgive yourself, it's almost like you will be cursed to continue the mistakes that you don't forgive yourself for.
Which kind of goes back to that swirling image of like stuff inside the pool that's not able to get out.
Yeah, where you get stuck. That's not ignoring your mistakes. That's not bypassing or dismissing them as important, right? That's a different kind of, that would get more into the illusion piece.
Yeah, well, it's nice that he explains that too. Is like, it's not just pretending that, I don't remember how he actually explicitly said it, but it's like, you're not just pretending that they don't exist. You're you're releasing them and not letting them hold on to you.
Yeah.
You're being their master, not letting them have mastery over you.
Yeah. So there's probably lots of different pieces of this that we could go into. I don't know if we're going to have time in this episode. Maybe. Let us
entire episode on Guru Patik.
Yeah, let us know in the comments if you want us to do, it doesn't even have to be a full like podcast length, hour-long video. If you guys want us to do like a 15, 20-minute video just breaking down the psychological parallels between good mental health and development and what Guru Patik's chakra model looks like that would be so much fun to do. So we'd be happy to do that.
I guarantee you it's going to be longer than 15 minutes, but a really good longer than 15 minutes.
We can condense it.
I think you have an immediate sort of clamoring in people's minds. Like when they think about like a character leveling up, they think about like a training sequence or like a training montage or something very physical.
Yeah.
I think it's a really cool thing that they chose to have this leveling up of Aang's character come from an internal state of being.
Yeah.
Like in order to be a stronger, powerful, more capable avatar, you're going to have to learn to forgive yourself. You're going to have to learn to get rid of your fear, your shame, all like I don't want to sound like too airy-fairy and fluffy, but like it's kind of cool that like the avatar's gaining of ability and leveling up is kind of almost like a therapy session.
Yeah.
In a weird way. I think it's a strong choice how instead of relying on something that's visible and tangible, because in good story writing, I find that like a lot of that physical, tangible stuff is really trying to get at what's underneath. But in this example, you're just going straight to what's underneath.
Yeah.
And I think that's a more challenging thing to do. But when you can construct it in a way like this, with good visual representation, with really tangible application to somebody's real life scenario, that's when you can really hit somebody with some really good, true pieces about their own life, and where you can really resonate with your audience in a way that I think doesn't just tell them a cool story, it also tells them how to be a better person.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating that you can do, which makes this so awesome that this is put forward as a kid's show. Yet it's really giving you some very accurate, very healthy, very important lessons about how to deal with your inner being.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that that's there speaks to the maturity of the show and how it's kind of layered in there. But I love that it's not doing it in such an in-your-face way where it's like, Aang, in order to be a good person, you need to deal with these things. It's hidden within the story of, in order to become the most capable, powerful avatar that is needed to do a very important job and role, this is something that you have to address and clear out. And it's camped in the spirituality that's set throughout Avatar, but it's a really short step, especially through the language that they use around like fear, guilt, shame, forgiveness, acceptance, right? In what could be a very esoteric spiritual practice that takes place here, they really ground it and make it concrete to the audience's personal experience, so that they're not saying this is what they should do. They're showing you this is what Aang needs to do, and getting that resonance from the audience of that feels to me like it's applicable to my own life. Totally. Like it's what I should be doing too.
I have a clip that I just know you're going to have stuff to talk about.
Okay.
The scene is when Iroh's teaching Zuko about all the 4 elements.
Season 2, episode 9.
Oh my gosh.
Why can't I do it? Instead of lightning, it keeps exploding in my face. Like everything always does.
I was afraid this might happen. You will not be able to master lightning until you have dealt with the turmoil inside you.
What turmoil?
That's phenomenal, isn't it?
It's such like a perfect little illustration. It's like, of course, like that's Zuko, but it also kind of goes back to like anger is the thing that's driving him.
Yep.
It's like I'm not angry.
And a great piece of show don't tell, because Iroh's kind of like laying out there's turmoil inside you, and it's like, instead of him saying, I don't think you're right.
Yes.
Why on earth would I have turmoil about my father abandoning me and whatever?
Yeah.
It's like he just has to say with emotion, what turmoil? And you're like, I see it.
Yeah.
I got
What's stronger? I agree. There's so many things that happen to me. You're like, no, you're wrong. I'm perfectly fine.
Exactly.
Fire is the element of power. The people of the Fire Nation have desire and will, and the energy and drive to achieve what they want. Earth is the element of substance. The people of the Earth Kingdom are diverse and strong. They are persistent and enduring. Air is the element of freedom. The air nomads detached themselves from worldly concerns and found peace and freedom. Also, they apparently had pretty good senses of humor. Water is the element of change. The people of the water tribe are capable of adapting to many things. They have a deep sense of community and love that holds them together through anything.
Why are you telling me these things?
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.
All this four elements talk is sounding like Avatar stuff.
It is the combination of the four elements in one person that makes the Avatar so powerful. But it can make you more powerful too. You see, the technique I am about to teach you is one I learned by studying the waterbenders.
I love how this just goes back to what I said before, how Zuko and Aang are on very similar paths, and they're cross-cutting between their journeys. And Iroh even says it directly. It's not too on the nose, but it's sort of like the Avatar's going through his journey. You're going on a very similar one. It looks very different, but you're both doing the same thing, just looks a little bit differently. You're just doing it in slightly different ways.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
There's so much great stuff about this particular scene. There's so many layers. I don't know how many we're going to pull through in this session, but
how much time do we have?
Yeah, I think the thing that really stands out to me that is cool about this is Iroh's thesis here, that you need to pull wisdom from multiple different sources, otherwise things become rigid and stale.
Yes.
He's talking about this at a cultural level in terms of what is the conflict going on in the world right now. Everybody's kind of been siloed off. They're in conflict, but like the water tribe is staying to themselves, the earth kingdom is staying to itself, the Fire Nation is doing its own thing, and nobody's really integrated. Everybody's in their own countries doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And that's where we see lots of challenges come up. Like with every country that we go to, with the Fire Nation, that's obvious. The Water Tribe deals with kind of the sexism that Katara faces because of their traditions that are stuck. The Earth Kingdom deals with its kind of insular, we're not looking at the world pieces. So everybody's got their challenges because they're not integrated and connected together, right? And the
air nomads were literally up in the clouds, and then that was kind of their downfall a little bit.
Exactly. They were oblivious, disconnected from what's happening. They get attacked first. What he's doing is he's taking this from a cultural lens and he's pulling it into this is how you facilitate this with the elements piece. But what I love about this is that psychologically, this is also true on an intrapersonal level, like within oneself. And it goes back to a lot of what we're talking about with characters, where why do we love somebody like Iroh? Iroh is not somebody who is one-dimensional, like just fire, just water, just earth, just air, right? He is wise, and he is also funny, and he is also incredibly powerful, and he's like all these different characters, like also incredibly kind, right? It takes somebody as a character who's written in a really special way for an audience and a fan base to fall in love with a filler episode, like the Tales of Bossing say, and it's whatever it's called, like Iroh's Day or whatever it is.
Yeah,
right.
One of 5 or 6 vignettes. of a character.
I think it's called Leaves from the Vine.
That's
named after the song. Don't cry. We're not going to cry this episode. We cry every episode. We're not going to cry on this one, right? Yeah. But he's such a multifaceted character because he's pulling from multiple different character traits, right? So I think the fact that he's both funny and wise is part of what actually helps us. And when we're looking at ourselves as individuals, I think there's something really cool about this, having multiple different pieces within you that you need to use holistically if you want to develop yourself as a person, right? It's a weird concept to think about, but what we're learning about in psychology, what we believe is the case, is that the human psyche is not one cohesive thing. but it's made up of a lot of different sub-personalities. And the term for that is it's the multiplicity. So you as a person are actually made up of lots of different sub-personalities that when they're working together cohesively look like one person and one personality. But when we have conflict, when there's distress, that's where we start to see the separation, the difficulties, the challenges, right? It's what Zuko's facing right now, right? He's got one part of him who is really focused on this honor element. And there's another part of him that is probably more kind, compassionate, kind of in that generally good space. And these two pieces are working against each other, which is the result for most of the challenges that he deals with. And his whole process, which is very similar to Aang trying to deal with the elements, which is, I think, similar to lots of characters' processes in the show, is they need to integrate the different elements of themselves, right? Aang needs to integrate his ability to be free or to lack responsibility, to have fun, with his capacity to take on the burden of responsibility as the Avatar. He also has to integrate his ethics and his desire to not kill with he needs to overpower and subdue somebody who is willing to do that. How does he do that? So many of the challenges in the show come down to, can characters integrate these parts together, right? And so there's a beautiful analogy here for how do we as human beings become mentally, psychologically, the best versions of ourselves. You have to integrate all the pieces of who you are. Because Iroh's got multiple different facets to his personality. And so I think there's something very cool that he's showing Zuko here, where it's, you have multiple pieces, but they're all working together in that multiplicity piece, right? The idea that you have more than just one element to your personality. You're actually made up of a bunch of different sub-personalities. When they're not working together well, they're in conflict. That's when they show up as feeling like, oh, this person's dealing with distress. This person doesn't know what to do. Normally it feels like that multiple elements of self that show up kind of gives life, makes things look different, makes somebody look vibrant, right? So I think when you create characters in that way where they have a multiplicity of things, when they're integrated, they start to feel like real characters, right? When you have, like, for example, Toph is another great example of this, because her blindness is an element of her person that has been integrated into what she is trying to do, right? It's like she's taken something that could be a weakness or a limitation, and she's learned how to work with it in a way that is integrated, right? So her blindness is not her entire character trait, but it's also not nothing. It's this nice orbiting thing where it's part of what makes her who she is, but it's not the totality and the essence, right? So her potential limitation is an element, but it also contributes to the rest of her character. And so there's something really cool about how I feel like this as a story element is really great at talking about how it is for us as people and human beings. How one-dimensional are you as a person? How much do you only rely on one trait, one element? Because that can limit your relationships, but it's part of also what I see with so many people when I deal with them in my practice, is that when people are one-dimensional, rigid also means fragile. So that when you have one thing that you rely on all the time, if you ever lose access to that ability, that part of yourself, you will be completely decimated and lost. Like, who am I? What do I do? Because I used to be all about this one trait and ability, but now that I can't do that anymore, or I don't have access to it, now I'm lost. I don't recognize myself. But somebody like Iroh, who relies on all these different things, he's got more flexibility, right? He's a more complete person who can shift and move what he does and how he relates to the world without losing his cohesive sense of who he is. So I think there's so many characters that we see that are well written who follow this, who have multiple dimensions that are connected together and integrated, and so many characters who we don't connect with because they don't have multiple facets connected together. It feels weird to us because us as beings of multiplicity in our subconscious, it's almost like we need to see beings of multiplicity out there if we're going to connect with them in a more dramatic, emotional way. That's what makes it feel like a real person. What feels like depth is not what we see on the surface, but my subconscious recognizing the subconscious process of another person.
I think it's fascinating how yet again we've come to the realization that a healthy, well-rounded individual is also what makes an interesting, well-rounded character.
Yeah.
And I think that you picking up on the fact that Toph was really written with that multiplicity and that integration existing within herself. Like, she did integrate her blindness. That's a really cool thing that's written into her character. But I also think it's the reason why I latch onto her less than I do Zuko, because Toph is written as a very well integrated character. Like, all those things have been dealt with and you really feel it, and the writers did a good job of showing you that. But with Zuko, we get to see his process of developing that. It's interesting you said that when you rely on one thing and when you are one-dimensional, you are more fragile. There's no word that I would use more for Prince Zuko than fragile. That feels like it really is emblematic of who he is, because you see him go through that process of like, this is my one thing. I rely on my anger. I rely on my rage. I'm going to capture the Avatar. I'm going to restore my honor. It's like, this is my one thing. And then that's taken away from him. And what does he do? He collapses. And then he ends up realizing that he needs to go a different path, and he literally has nothing left, and his bending is gone.
Yeah.
And so like, that's such a cool illustration how exactly what you're talking about. It's like, the one thing that you had, you were a one-dimensional character, and the one thing that you had is now gone. Now, who are you? And that's exactly the question that Uncle Iroh asks him. He's like,
I'm begging you, Prince Zuko. It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions. Who are you? And what do you want?
it's time for you to look inward. Who are you? What do you want? Like, these are the questions that are central to, like, and that's so cool for me to see, because I love that so much, because we are seeing a one-dimensional character step into another dimension. Like, how much in his introduction was Zuko maybe primed to be a one-dimensional villainous character, but he didn't stay that way. He was the epitome of a redemption story of somebody not just going from evil to good, but somebody going from one-dimensional to two-dimensional to three-dimensional to somebody who's a fully fleshed out character. I think that's a big piece of what I resonated with him personally.
It leaves me with kind of a question when you're talking about that and seeing that Zuko feels like the character you resonate with, the deuteragonist to Aang. I wonder, when we look at like main characters or the characters we connect with, is the protagonist the character who is in the most process?
No, not necessarily.
There might be protagonists that are in less process, but does that mean that we then end up connecting with other characters who are more in this like active journey of shifting and moving and discovering, right? And do we resonate the most with the people who shift the most?
I think that we resonate most with the characters who shift in a way that we have felt before. So I don't think that the character that is experiencing the most change is necessarily who we end up relating to the most. I think it's the character who's undergone the same kind of change that we have, or the same kind of change that we know that we need to go
deals
through.
with the same problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
You said before that when I talked about the Zuko getting angry piece.
Yeah.
That I was getting kind of emotional. Yeah. I was getting kind of emotional. And the reason is because I started realizing this, like, even just a couple weeks ago. It's like, I think Zuko's journey is one that I really personally resonate with, because I think it really touches on something that I went through like a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it became really, really clear a little while ago. I showed you that scene where Zuko's on the beach and everybody's asking like you're really angry.
Yeah.
Is it all these things in your situation, all these things surrounding you? It's like, no, it's not this. It's not my dad. It's not my uncle. It's not you guys. It's like, why are you so angry? It's like I'm angry at myself.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really too public knowledge at this point.
And you also don't have to talk about it, because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like I've got the connection point, and I know what you mean.
Yeah. I'll try to dance the line in between here, but went through a pretty rough situation with a relationship a while back, and I was left picking up the pieces of a broken relationship, and really some kind of nasty trauma that went along with it. And what I realized through that process is that, as much as you can say that I wasn't to blame for the situation, I looked back on it and was like, I'm the one who decided to go forward with this. I'm the one who decided not to see these red flags. I'm the one who decided to dismiss X, Y, and Z, but I just let it slide.
Yeah.
And so I look back at that, I'm like, I'm really angry at myself for not having seen that before and not having dealt with it. When I think back to it, it's like, I don't think I really showed it to a lot of people, and I tried to hide it pretty well, but I used to be really, really angry. I still am a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think when you talk about when you're at war within yourself and you're trying to put forward something that isn't actually what's happening, when you're putting forward a facade that's not accurate to the situation.
Yeah.
Because what was happening was that I was trying to keep this facade of somebody who had it all together, who everything was going right. Yeah, we'll break the fourth wall here a little bit, and I'll decide what to keep in and what not to.
You can edit whatever you want.
Yeah, I used to be married, and I went through a pretty nasty divorce. And the marriage didn't even last that long. It was like a year before things really went off the rails.
Yeah,
and we come from a very religious kind of Christian background, and there is this deeply integrated part of myself that, like, a good person is somebody who has their marriage put together, somebody who had, like, and that was a big one because
your honor, eh?
Yeah. Oh, shit. Yeah. Fucking.
Yeah.
It's like I'd lost my honor.
Yeah.
When I look back on it, man, this is turning into a bit of a therapy session, isn't it?
It's the way that it goes sometimes.
That's so stupidly, like, on the nose now. I didn't even see it. It's like, holy shit, like, I needed to restore my honor.
Yeah.
It's like, no wonder I connected with this character.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Like, obviously.
It just highlights exactly what you were saying. It's like, if something is going on underneath, but you're putting forward something that's not actually accurate to what that is. It's like you're playing two roles at the same time. You're trying to put forward two different characters and deal with them at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like that internal war and that conflict going on inside of you, and it takes so much energy just to manage those two different parts of yourself.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where it's like you mentioned before, like, it's like a beach ball. You're trying to push it under the water, and all of a sudden it just pops up, and it's just like that explosion of energy. It's just like you don't really feel where it's coming from. And it's interesting how that tends to come out in very specific ways. I guess for some people it's sadness, but for me it was definitely anger.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I feel kind of silly crying on camera, but in another way, I kind of feel kind of vindicated that, like, no wonder there's a reason I resonated with this character.
Exactly. Right. It's cool the way that works, right? And I don't know. There's a part of me that kind of feels like, I don't know if it's part of our culture or the relationships that we have, like when we ask if there's like a hidden social contract that we ask people to be okay. Because part of the problem that I see so often is, and it sounds like your experience is exactly like this, a lot of the time it feels like all the energy and the effort that we have to invest in looking okay is actually what contributes to us ending up falling apart in the first place.
It's exhausting.
It's too much.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, whether it's something that we believe or something that we pull from our culture, whatever it is, like, part of me really strongly feels like we shouldn't have to. It should be okay to fall apart. It should be okay to say, this sucks. I feel like I lost something important to me. I feel shame because I feel like I lost what makes me somebody who is in good standing with the community.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like I lost the thing that allows me to be good enough to be connected to my family. It just kind of sucks that, like, it's that pressure and that standard that would actually lead somebody to disintegrate when they're under so much strain. And really, like, when you feel like you've lost your honor, when you have the experience of shame, that's where you need connection with people the most.
That's why I think that one of the most impactful scenes that everybody resonates with so much is when Zuko goes back to ask for forgiveness from Uncle Iroh. It's like, that's exactly it. It's like you losing your honor with your father and not being able to capture the Avatar. that's whatever. To betray your uncle, to betray your family, that's truly losing your honor.
I mean, that's where Zuko really, like, technically he did the right thing when he stood up. He didn't culturally do the right thing, but he did the right thing when he stood up to his father in the war meeting. He definitely did the wrong thing when he betrayed Iroh.
Yeah.
And he needs to come back and ask for that forgiveness. But it's that wonderful piece where, like, without words, Iroh takes him back and says, it's okay that you made mistakes.
Yeah.
I don't hold it against you that you might have done something wrong. You're still okay. We're still okay. You're still welcomed and connected to be part of this relationship.
The word choice that he uses in that scene, I think, is so powerful. He said that I was never angry at you. I was sad that you lost your way.
Yeah.
It's like, if you need anything more powerful to kind of show you that, like, this person is actually oriented towards the most important thing. It's like, you messing up, that's whatever. It's, are you on the right path?
Yeah. And I don't know if this is something that you can edit and bleep this as we need to, but
yeah, we will.
I know that I speak for everybody in the family, and I hope that I speak for people who come from spiritual backgrounds like ours or different from ours. But in a situation where somebody is in that much pain, feeling that much shame for something they may or may not have contributed to, my feeling, and I hope this is what the case is for everybody else's, the entire time that you're going through that was always, fuck your honor. Are you okay? That's the only thing that matters. We can rebuild your honor. We can figure that out. But are you as a person doing okay? That is the only priority and the only thing that matters.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think from my side of the coin, I think I always knew that was the case, and, like, I don't think anybody in our family would have ever said anything differently. I think the thing that I really, really struggled with was, for the first time in a long time, my biggest weaknesses were just laid bare for me to really see. And, like, my weaknesses weren't ones of action, they were ones of lack of action. And it wasn't doing something, it was kind of realizing that I was far more naive than I really was.
Yeah.
I think it was a lot of anger towards the realization of who I was and really not liking myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of that self-anger comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason that beach scene really hit me so hard was it's like I had that exact moment where I'm like I know exactly what's wrong, and what's wrong is that I'm seeing everything that's wrong, and everything is kind of converging in this one moment.
Yeah.
And I really don't like who I am.
Yeah. I think that's where we come back to the Iroh scene, though, right? Of, like, those pieces of yourself that you don't like, those are still facets of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to move forward, we have to integrate that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is how, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about here, in some ways, I'm glad that you're talking about it, because it's like, it really is a peek into the window of what I see with people all the time when they come in and they're talking about exactly what you're talking about. And, like, the question becomes, what is our response to those parts of us that we see that we don't like? And I think a lot of the time what those things really need from us is, like, they need gentle acceptance. It's like, yeah, I might have been naive in this situation. How am I going to treat that part? What does the naive part of me need right now? Because it being laid bare is this moment of potential transformation, but it's painful.
Yeah.
So what does it require? And I think a lot of the time it's a gentle hand.
Yeah.
Not too much. Don't beat yourself up. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, things fell apart. Yeah, it's painful. But, like, this part can still be okay. This part can still be transitioned and moved into something. Like, it needs growth. So what does it need to help it in this situation going forward? How do we support it? How do we take care of it like it's valuable? How do we take care of Jordan like he's valuable? So integration's uncomfortable, but I think oftentimes it's not because of the stuff on our side. It's a painful experience that's uncomfortable. But those parts often don't need to be pushed. They don't need to be condemned. They don't need to be chastised. They need, like, you've been laid bare. Now come here. Let me bring you back in. And let me find a place to integrate you and connect you to other parts so that that weakness has other parts that can help support it. That it doesn't have to deal with the weakness all by itself out in the wilderness, abandoned, like Zuko, right? Yeah. The exiles. When it comes in and it gets the support of the internal community, then it's like, oh, now we can figure it out. Now I can get resources from other parts. But it's the painful piece of recognizing it and needing to, like, that's part of you. We got to let it be part of you and welcome it in as part of your experience.
I don't know how I didn't see this sooner, but there's another connection point. I basically had a lightning on the mountain strike me down moment. Like, literally.
Yeah, yeah.
Come on! Strike me! You've never held back before!
Basically what happened is that in the midst of this nasty, bitter divorce that was sort of in the most grossest part of its stage, I had a couple friends who we decided to hike a really tough mountain. For those of you who know Vancouver mountain ranges, it's called Black Tusk. You can look it up. It's a pretty cool hike, but it's pretty challenging. And so we hiked up to this mountain, and there's two peaks that you can go to. One is that it's like this first peak where it's like you see this beautiful ridge line, and you get these great views and a beautiful lake below. And then there's a piece where you have to literally do some rock climbing. We climbed the second mountain ridge, and it was just like this moment of like conquering. And there's this internal piece of like, yes, like through all the difficult stuff that I've been going through, it's like this cool, emblematic mountain peak. I made it. You can get through moment. Everybody was heading back down, and I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna take a moment. I just need a moment to myself. And so they kind of get out of sight. They start hiking back down the mountain. And I have this moment where I'm just sort of by myself, looking out in this mountain on this peak, and just start screaming, just start yelling into the wind, start blaming everything that I can blame. I start screaming into the wind. I start screaming at God. I start screaming at this other person who ended this relationship. Grab this rock. I start slamming it on the ground, and it's just like this mess. And then, lo and behold, no surprise, everybody heard the screaming. I came running back up the mountain, asking if I'm okay.
Good friends, right?
Yeah. I look down. I didn't realize I was like smashing my finger against this big rock as I was slamming it on the ground like a caveman. Kind of blood all over my hands, and like in this crying, puddling mess of anger and bitterness. And I think it was one of the most impactful things to see how quickly all these guys were so willing to just go right to, are you okay?
Yeah.
And like bypass all the surface level stuff and like all the anger, all the kind of crazy shit that I was screaming.
Yep.
It's like, forget all that. It's like, are you okay? And I think back to, and it's weird how that just makes me think of one thing in particular, and that's there's one of the guys who was there. Every so often he'll bring up this moment specifically as like we were cool before, but like, man, did we become good friends after that moment? Yeah. It's like, it's weird how like it's a really terrible thing that happened, and a really bitter, sad, kind of gross experience in one sense for me personally. But man, did it create a lot of bonding. And I can't help but think, like, in a similar way, it's like how much of a good character is somebody who you see them in a really vulnerable state. You see them work through that process. And there's something about that that just bonds you to them.
I think most people would imagine something like conflict as being something that only separates people.
Yeah.
But I think when you're talking about this experience and we look at stories in general, I think we know that conflict actually can build connection. It's just about how do you deal with it.
Yeah.
When conflict shows up, do you try to fix everything? Do you try to be right? You say, oh, Jordan, calm down. You got it, whatever. Or do you come to conflict curious? Hey, man, are you okay? Like, that's the difference in whether it's going to build distance or build connection. And I feel like that shows up with the way that our favorite characters go through this too, right? They go through conflicts, they go through struggles, and it brings us closer to them.
Yeah.
Because we're curious about what's happening for them.
Yeah.
We like to see ourselves in our stories, right?
That's exactly why we connect with them.
2 pieces. I think part of the story of what you're talking about here, there's actually a really cool connection with something that Aang says to Katara at the very end of season 3 when she's about to go try to get revenge on the guy who killed her mom.
Yeah.
And it seems really simple, but Aang says, yeah, you can go and do this thing, but when you meet him, let it out and let it go. And I feel like people way too often get stuck, specifically with forgiveness, but for any of the emotional muck that they're feeling, with the let it go part. But from what I've seen in practice, I actually think the let it out is critical. Like, what we don't express stays buried. If you try to let go of something, it's like trying to sail a ship when the anchor's still down.
Yeah.
It's like, you need to let things out. You need to actually express, let all that feeling actually show up and be real before you're going to be able to let things go and move on from something. I think too often people get stuck in that, like, I need to show the facade, I need to have everything together, and I will never actually deeply and fully express. I might talk about it, but there's a huge difference between talking about how I feel and expressing how I feel.
Huge difference.
And you maybe have to express the way that you feel deeply and fully before we'll actually be prepared to let it go. So I think that's a valuable piece. There's a part too where I think one of the things that really struck me about some of these characters that we're looking at is there's a moment, the entire last Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula, with Katara there. There's something really cool that I think the writers put in there about characters and the way that their ethoses or their frameworks kind of clash that makes something like that significantly more impactful. And I don't know how you're going to think about this, but I feel like the last Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula is actually a battle between fear and trust.
So I did not catch that when I watched it.
So on the fear side is Azula, because she deals with her relationships utilizing fear. It's the theme that goes all throughout. It's the first one that she starts her conversation with the captain of the boat with. You should fear me more than you fear the tides. It goes through her conversation with May when May and Ty Lee betray her. It's like, I love Zuko more than I fear you. And then it goes to when she's about to be coronated, right? She's recognizing that because May betrayed her and doesn't fear her, she can't use fear anymore to control her relationships. And Azula, as well as she's written, is a one-dimensional character.
Yes.
Because she can only utilize fear in her relationships. And when she loses access to that, you see her start to fall apart and disintegrate. And Zuko and Katara are exactly the opposite in that they start from a place of betrayal. Like they're conflictual the whole time. They're in the catacombs in Ba Sing Se. Katara starts to open up to Zuko a little bit. They start to build trust. Zuko shatters it. And when he finally rejoins the group, like they're in huge conflict because Katara very rightfully doesn't trust Zuko. And so they have to do a lot of work in season 3 to begin to rebuild trust together.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of the final conflict ends up being Azula versus Zuko and Katara, because Zuko is the one that protects Katara from being decimated by the lightning bolt. So he is trustworthy for her and that he can support her and protect her. And it's actually their connection of trust that allows them to do what they need to do to beat Azula. Whereas Azula's weakened by this lack of her ability to utilize fear anymore, so that now things are falling apart for her.
Yeah.
And especially like, what was it that you're talking about when you said, like, you see a character like Zuko integrating, right? Like becoming more of who he is. You want to see a portrait of a character disintegrating. Like you look at Azula absolutely like spewing fire, crying hysterically, right? Like she is in so much distress because she's lost her ability to navigate her world in the way that she knows how. And she's got nothing left. That's something that makes something like a fight scene. Like there's so much great, martial arts combat in the show. It's like great because it's grounded in the actual real world martial arts styles, right? Clearly lots of work went into choreographing and animating that. But I feel like it's that behind the curtain, below the surface, symbolic and metaphorical work that's being done that really gives that scene its gravity, its significance, right? Maybe like a lesson that they're trying to give us, or the implication of this combat. When you navigate your relationships through fear, you will end up alone. When you navigate your relationships with trust, you will end up at least having somebody who has your back. And it's cool, I think, the way that it plays out then, that it's Katara who finishes it, not Zuko, because he has somebody who he trusts, who can support him when things get too big.
You know what's interesting is that I actually didn't like the way that Katara finished the fight when I first saw it, but having the background knowledge and kind of seeing it with that new light, with that symbolism that you're describing, I actually do like it the way it was portrayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, because there's a flip too, right? Where you have Katara's mother gets killed by a firebender. A firebender protects Katara's life, right? There's the flip. There's the twist. So I think there's an element where we can oftentimes disagree with the choices that storytellers make in terms of where they take their story. But when we have a deeper justification for why they did it, I think it makes a lot of choices for us easier to consume, right? It's easier to integrate and understand the choice that they made when we know the reasons behind it.
Totally.
And if you don't want to slap your audience across the face with your reasoning, you use symbolism and metaphor to do it, which is part of, I think, why they've made such good characters and such a good story as a whole.
I feel like that took a very stark tonal shift.
It did do a very tonal shift.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, to whatever degree you want to include this or not include this, right?
We'll see in the editing.
Yeah, exactly. You got the power of this. I'll say genuinely from my perspective, like I really appreciate the vulnerability that you have bringing this, because
Well, we started that way. We can't exactly just stop that.
No, but
we've
it's
opened
like,
Pandora's box of emotions.
So we're going to be
episode
here,
2.
right?
Yeah.
It's, to me though, it's like, I look at you doing that, I'm like, man, I don't know how I'd feel having that stuff on the internet about me. But at the same time, it's like, I do think from my perspective, that has less to do with whether it's right or not. It has a lot more to do with fear. Right? For me, it's fear about like, what would people think if they knew all my stuff? Or how would it affect my career if people knew that I was like a person who had vulnerabilities and flaws and
a dirty divorcee?
Yeah. Like, oh, where's the honor? That, like, it's scary. It's scary what people would think about you. But I don't know. A part of me thinks too that like, I wonder if there's some inherent value in being open and honest like that, and being not trying to hide the fact that you're a real person, right? Like, this is the stuff that I've dealt with. This is my difficulties, my challenges. And this is part of what makes me a normal human being. Because we all go through this stuff. It's just so much of the time I think we look at other people and say, well, I'm different from them because I don't see these parts of them. And so, yeah, maybe, I don't know. Who knows at what point maybe my time's going to come and I'm going to have this moment too, right? And so I hope that if my day ever comes where I have this part, I'm as brave as you to talk about the stuff that you talked about.
I wish I could say it was bravery. I feel like it's riding a bicycle. It's like, oh, we already dealt with this a long time ago. It's like I got forced into this situation a while back, so this just feels natural now.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I do know what you mean. In a weird way, I think it's like, I think it's surprising for me to hear that. It's like, really? Like, you're afraid of this? The person who deals with opening up people's emotions every day?
But other people's emotions are easy.
Oh, I see.
Right? Because nobody is going to judge me for what other people feel.
I mean, that's very, very true. When you put it that way, it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it's like we talked about before, right? It's like the giving hope to other people is way easier than giving it to yourself. To be able to navigate that world for somebody else is different because I don't have to face the same things that they face. They leave my office, they go home at the end of the day. They're the ones who have to be responsible for their own life. I don't have to be. But when it comes to my stuff and my pain, I have to be responsible for my own life. And that, honestly, maybe a little bit like Aang. I wonder how much I run away from my own responsibilities when it comes to the willingness to be perceived by other people as a normal human being with flaws and errors. Right? So I think in a different way than you, but probably a similar feeling. It's like, a different response to that potential vulnerability.
It's not surprising then, at least from a feeling perspective, of why you seemed to resonate a little bit with Toph, the person who has it all together, sturdy, earthbender, nothing can faze you.
Yeah.
Sort of, I can carry my own weight. That's the things that they, to me, feel like would be necessary traits in a counselor and somebody who's dealing with everybody else's situations.
Yeah.
So.
And then maybe similar to Toph too, it probably is part of the reason too that you have it all together. What does that do to your relationships? It really creates limitations in how deep you can go. But the more that you have those vulnerabilities, that openness, it's like, then you have more of a chance to get that connection with people. Toph, we see that when she starts to become more open, more vulnerable, share more of those parts of herself, get real, then she builds connection with other people. So, yeah, maybe that'll be my task too. But
if and when that day does come, I can't promise that I'll be a seasoned veteran when it comes to listening and processing people's emotions with them as much as a registered psychotherapist, but I can promise that I'll do my best.
I appreciate it. And you talk about trust. I know that to be true. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on this interesting journey. I thought we were going to talk exclusively about character development, there was a bunch of different, we didn't get nearly as much into Sokka as I anticipated that we would.
I feel so bad because like Sokka is, you know what? Let's save this for another one because I love so much about Sokka and specifically like his voice acting. I feel like maybe it would be worthwhile for us to do some comparisons between this version of Avatar and the brand new released live action version. Because I feel like there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about, and maybe some of the things that we didn't get to today, we can start talking about in that one.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Sokka specifically, I have probably 17 pages and like a 45-minute dissertation speech about what I think are some deep-seated problems with the live action version.
Well, spoilers for that. Keep your opinion close to the chest. Like, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Who knows? You'll have to tune in next time to find out.
Sorry, I love it. Or do I? No, I think that with Sokka specifically, with all the characters, there's so much that we can delve into with the variation between the animated version and the live action version. There's so much that we can talk about. Maybe if we felt like we weren't able to touch on some things today, that's ripe opportunities to talk about it in the next episode in part 2. So if you guys do want to see part 2 where we kind of contrast the animated and the live action version, please subscribe, click the bell icon so that you get notified when we put out that video. Leave us a comment if there's anything that you want us to touch on in that episode. If you guys feel like you resonated more with one character or another, let us know in the comments. Who's your favorite? Who do you think was the best written? We want to know.
Thanks so much for joining us on this one, guys. It was a bit of a roller coaster, but I think important.
Yeah. Roller coasters are fun.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Take care.